Okay, so troubleshooting long distance. There's three main goals to keep in mind when starting a new long distance ticket. We have verify Granite, verify local, and verify long distance. We want to start with our records first, so Granite. We want to verify Granite first. We want to start with verifying our records first. We basically just want to know what information we need to confirm with the local carrier. Um, Basically, pick information, and we need to make sure that it's loaded correctly in the programs we use for long distance. So we're going to cover that next. We're going to cover everything we need to know about verifying the information and what information we need to verify on Granite's end first, and then we can move on to opening up a ticket with the local carrier and getting call samples for the long distance carrier to verify on their end. So like any other normal ticket that we have been used to working, like a no dial tone ticket or ring no answer ticket, what's the first thing we're told to do, right? First thing we're told to do is verify everything. So we want to go to the services page, right? So this is what we're going to cover now. So verifying Granite. There's three key places to look to verify services on Granite's end. As I mentioned, any other regular ticket, we always want to check the services page. The services page is where we can see if a line is serviced by us. We can see different kind of features that is on that line. We can see all the lines in that account. We see all kinds of information in there. That's also where we would find, pick and LPIC information, and, verifying that it does have Granite LD. So I'm going to pull that up now. So I have I got Cornerstone pulled up here, and I have a ticket, just an example ticket to show you. So this is going to be, an actual practical, this is a real ticket, and I like to show you this because once we're actually starting to work long distance tickets, this is what we'll actually be doing, right? So let's say we got this ticket. Let's go into it, right? Or I have it here. Let's say we get this ticket assigned to us, right? First thing we want to do is open the services page. Just take a second for that to load. There we go. Okay. I also have the ticket open here. So of course, when we get a ticket assigned to us, right? Very first thing we're gonna see. Let's just pretend all these notes aren't really there, right? So let's say we get assigned this ticket, right? We're working. So oranges, we get a long distance ticket. Okay, this is our first note. Customer called in to report telephone number blank, can make local calls but cannot dial long distance calls. Example of the long distance number is this. Called customer service, and they said that this number has long distance enabled. Okay, so from this first note, that we know that this line can make local calls, but they can't dial long distance. So that is a true long distance issue. The opening note does state that they can call local, and they just can't call long distance. So the first thing we want to do, of course, is verify services with Granite, or Granite services, per our bullet point here, right? First step, services page, confirm whether the line is listed under 1+ or not. This will determine if it is Granite LD or not. So the first step is we basically want to make sure that we do service this line and we can work it. Just like any other ticket, when we're checking services, we check services to make sure we service it. We're going to do the same thing with long distance. We just want to make sure they're with us. So this is our services page, right? Our phone number here is ending in 0639. So let's go through the local 0639. Okay, perfect. It looks like it's in there. And it's not end dated, so we know we at least service this line for the local side. So this section, it's called 1+ numbers. That is the long distance services. So, down here where we usually look, it just says local up here. That means it's our local services. So the services page divides, the service types into two sections. We have one service type, which is 1+ numbers or long distance. And you can remember that pretty easily. When we call a long distance number from a landline, you always have to enter the 1 and then the full number. So that's why it's called 1+. It's 1 plus the number. So when you're in the services page, just remember that 1+ numbers, that's long distance. It's going to be in this section here. So we also want to make sure that our line ending in 0639 is also in this list. And by looking at this, we will know, if our line is in here we'll know that we service Granite LD, at least according to our services page. And we, of course, do see it here. It's listed here. It will be listed twice, but that's okay. So we have, let me see. The reason why it is listed twice is because it is, listed as local. So Bell South is the carrier for the local, and then it's listed as Verizon B or VZB for the long distance. And of course, remember, VZB or Verizon Business is our long distance carrier that we use, or MCI, Verizon Business, either or. You can refer. I always call them MCI, Verizon Business. But that's great. So we now know that we have a line here, and it is in OnePlus, and it's in the services page. So according to the service page, we do service this line. So let's go back to our bullet points here. The next thing is we actually want to check it in the ponds. So here, let me pull that back up here. Oh. So here are the ponds, and just a quick brief overview of ponds. What a pond is, it literally stands for purchase order number, and this is what we send over to the carriers when we are adding new services to an account. So with this account, we want our customer is requesting, let's say they're opening up a new account. Our customer is going to request local services, long distance services, and all that, and maybe all these features on these lines, right? All these are different features for each line. These orders, they're orders, and all of these have like information that we sent over requesting that specific information. So what we're doing for long distance is we're going to actually go through all of the orders, and all we're doing is we're looking for the order that requested long distance. In that order, they're going to show us, the order is going to show us what PIC and LPIC that we requested. So any line, any line that does long distance will, of course, have that PIC and LPIC. For here at Granite, if it's Granite LD, that PIC should be 0555. But of course, we want to confirm that. So we are looking at the OnePlus, and it's under OnePlus. In a perfect world, it's going to be 0555 for the PIC every single time. But of course, we don't live in a perfect world, and we need to verify that because mistakes are made. It's common and it's okay, but that's where we come in to try to verify that and catch that if needed. So we're gonna start at the bottom of the list because the bottom pawn is the most recent, and we want to be correct with the most recent pawn. We don't want to go off of a pawn that was maybe older and there was a new pawn that maybe submitted something differently. That's why we start at the bottom. So start at the bottom, work our way up, and see if we can find the PICs and LPICs, right? So let's just remember our phone number here, and our phone number ends in 0639. Okay, so this is what a pawn looks like, right? All this information, maybe some new information, but the only thing we really want to look for as far as long distance goes, we want to look for our number. We come down here in this little area, this little section. We see our number, and great. So we want to click Save Form. This is where all the information is, basically what we requested, or at least for the long distance portion. Now here you see that there's no information. There's a couple pieces of information, but nothing that really helps us. If you actually look down, where is it? So right here, these sections, Interlata, Presubscript Indicator Code, PIC, and LPIC. This is where the codes should be. So if you go into a pawn and you see it's blank, that is okay. We'll just go to the next pawn. Just because this pawn, it just wasn't requesting that information. It was requesting some different information. So that's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna go through every single pawn. We're gonna come down here. We're gonna click our line, and we're gonna click it, and then we're gonna look in these sections. If it's blank, we'll go to the next pawn. So that's what we're gonna do. Let's go back. We checked this one, so we're gonna check the second one. Okay, and our line isn't even in this pawn, which is okay because that pawn was just dealing with these two lines. So because our line isn't in here, we don't need to be bothered with those. So we're going to go to the next one. Okay, so here's our line again, 0639. Let's click Save Form. And there we go. It populates in this one. So Interlata, PIC, that is showing as 0555. and the LPIC looks like it's showing as 5124. So that is great. That's good information, and this is why we want to check the pawns, because as mentioned before, the LPIC doesn't, even if Granite long distance, or even if, excuse me, let me go back a little bit. Even if a customer has Granite long distance, just because the PIC is going to be 0555 every time doesn't mean the LPIC is going to be 0555 every time. The LPIC is determined by the local carrier, and it's whatever long distance network that they have that they'll put on there. So for this case, it's 5124. So that's why we want to check the pawns, because we also want to note the LPIC. So this is what I usually do once I find this information. I got 0555, 5124. I'll scroll all the way up here. This is the pawn. So I just copy it, and I come over to my ticket, and this is, we can ignore, these notes for now. You can actually kind of see I kind of already structured it similar in this note, but I'll do it again for you. So say we're working a brand new ticket. This is my very first thing. Every single long distance ticket is the same with this first step. I always say per pawn, copy that pawn, the PIC / LPIC is 0555 5124. Let me just double check that. 5124, right? Yep, 5124. Okay, so that's our very first note. We're already starting our long distance ticket. We're on good path right now. So information we know for this line is, per this purchase order number, per the latest pawn, the PIC and LPIC for our line in question is 0555 and 5124. The reason why we want to note this is because once we're done verifying services with Granite, or confirming our own services and our own information, we're now going to take this information to the local carrier, and we're going to make sure that they also have the same information on their end. But before we do that, we're going to move on to, well, actually, hold on. Bear with me 1 second here. Yes, so before we actually, confirm this information with the local carrier, there's one last step that there's one last thing we need to look at on our end to make sure, long distance was programmed correctly when this first came to us. So let me pull this back up. So we went over services page, we went over pawns, and we are now on portfolio. So, okay. Confirm the line or lines is loaded in and activated in portfolio. Remember to also check the BTN. Okay, so portfolio, we're gonna dive into that. What is portfolio? So in order to get to portfolio, you're going to go to this screen, where you access VTag, right? Pull up that screen, that page where we can access VTag. You should have your credentials. I know some new reps may take a while to get these credentials. May not have VTag quite yet, but if you're still waiting on those, that is totally okay. Just reach out to a rep that you may know that has access to this, or reach out to a soup, and they can check it for you until you do get access. Once you do get access, this is the screen you're gonna see, and for long distance, what we want to know is order management 1+. And I know there's a bunch of different links here, and the two important ones that you need to remember, or the ones that I always use the most, is VTag and order management 1+. Those are really the only two that I use. VTag, of course, is just for the regular tickets. Is where we can find other information and whatnot. But for all intents and purposes, for us, we want to check order management 1+, and it's easy to remember for long distance, because this, of course, says 1+ again. So just remember that 1+ means long distance. If you ever see 1+ in a context of Granite or telephones like this, 1+ means long distance. So if you're looking, and maybe you're watching this, and maybe maybe a month goes by before you even had to do a long distance ticket, and you're trying to remember where to go, just remember, if you see 1+, that's where we want to go. So we're gonna click it. As soon as we click it, we're gonna come to this page every time. So once we come to that page, we just want to hit enter. As soon as we hit enter, we're going to see this page. Okay, so what Portfolio is it's very similar to the e-bonding system that we have with the local carriers. So let me go back to our ticket here. I can explain it. So for example, we have our e-bonding system down here, right? So you know how we're opening up a normal no dial tone ticket, just a normal regular ticket, right, with a local carrier. What are we gonna do? We're gonna click this, and then we're gonna list the note. Usually it's no dial tone, and then in this little box we're gonna write our little spiel that we usually put in there. We'll put our number in there, put the local contact, all that information, all that good stuff in there. And we're gonna hit submit, boom, and then of course we'll come over to the summary page, and that's where we'll find the commit and all that, right? So how this whole system works, the e-bonding system, and we'll even get closeout notes, right, from the local carrier once the tech submits the closeout notes on its ticket, right? So just looking at this, it's safe to say that our e-bonding system is linked to the local carrier's system that they use on their computers. The Portfolio is the same thing. It's very similar. So think about e-bonding as like a small window into AT&T or the local carrier service. Portfolio is a small window or a small look into the long distance carrier services. So just think about Portfolio as like the long distance version of e-bonding. As essentially what it is. However, it does function a little differently. So in Portfolio, we're not going to be making tickets or anything like that. The only thing we're doing in Portfolio is we are literally only making sure that it's loaded in Portfolio. So when a customer comes to us and they say, hey, we want Granite long distance, part of the steps to grant that is to make sure it's loaded in this program. This program is linked to Verizon MCI, and whatever we put in this little box or whatever we program in this program, the long distance carrier is going to receive it on their end, and they'll program in the switch. So almost think of it kind of like the pawns when we're submitting it to the local carrier. It's very similar. So whatever we enter in here initially should reflect what the long distance carrier has on their end. So while we're troubleshooting, what we want to do is we just want to make sure it's accurate. We want to make sure it's working. So the very first thing we're going to do here is we're going to put our phone number in here, right? And when we hit this drop down button, there's going to be two options. So let's go back to it. There's going to be two options. It's going to say Interlada E and Intralada A. Always select Interlada E. Interlada E is for the PIC. Intralada is for the LPIC. But because the LPIC is usually handled by the local carrier for long distance calls, we're only checking the PIC network, which is Interlada E. And when you hit the drop down, it's going to be the very first one. So it's Interlada E, and then under it says Intralada A. We want to hit Interlada E. And then we also want to, of course, put our phone number in there. And then we'll hit details. Okay, and so once we hit details, the next page is going to pop up, and it's going to look like this. So already loaded. This is what it looks like when the line is loaded, right? Okay, cool. We got all our information in here. Everything looks good. When it's not loaded or if it's deactivated, it'll look a little different. And we'll show that in a sec. But so then, to get a little more information, we want to go into it further. We can see a little more, just a better screen of this. We're just going to hit edit ANI. As soon as you hit edit ANI, this screen pops up. And we have all of our boxes here. So this is where, we like edit ANI, we can actually change things in here. That's why we want to go to this page, just in case we need to. But for all intents and purposes, we're actually going to look. So we're looking at our phone number here, right? This example, the phone number was 4144. And we see that it's area of service category. It's 1+ international, which is good. And it says activate, and we have our billing phone number here, and you can see it's something different. So just by looking at this, we know it's loaded. We know that it can call international. We know it's activated. It also shows us the BTN right here. Something that's very important to know is that whatever the BTN is programmed as, it will affect all the other lines under that. So a billing telephone number has other phone numbers listed under it, and the billing telephone number is basically the first is the number that gets charged, and there's a bunch of numbers that kind of follow it. So for this number, it has some numbers have they are their own BTNs, but some numbers have different BTNs. So for this example, this line has its BTN is a different line. So whatever is loaded under this BTN can affect this line. Even if this line is completely loaded fine, everything is testing okay, if the BTN for whatever reason is loaded incorrectly or there's something wrong with it, it can and will affect the other line. So when you go in portfolio and you see that the BTN is a different line, simply just copy and paste it, go back to the initial screen, and you can do that by hitting status. You just want to enter that into this box, and then just follow the process again. Enter letter E, hit details, hit edit ANI, make sure it's in there. And so yeah, that's what it looks like if it is loaded. We just want to make sure that the phone line is loaded and the BTN is loaded. So let's say we go into portfolio and it's not loaded. So this is what it looks like when it's not loaded. So we put a line in here, enter letter E, and we'll hit we'll hit that button here. We'll hit details, right? As soon as we hit details, this is the other page that you could see. If you see this page, it says this ANI does not exist. Select provision if you wish to add this ANI to your account or enter another ANI. Blah blah blah. Right. Basically, what it's saying is this line isn't loaded in portfolio, and if you would like to load it, hit provisioning to load it. So this is where we would go to load it, but that's the responsibility of a different internal team. It's called LD and toll free, and they are the ones that are in charge of making sure that lines are loaded good in portfolio and whatnot. So that being said, if we go into portfolio and we see that it's not loaded, but we have services page saying that the PIC is 0555, so we know it's supposed to be loaded, then we're gonna have to fix this, right? Going back a little bit too, if our PIC is 0555 and it's Granite LD, the line is supposed to be loaded in portfolio. But like if you're dealing with an account that the PIC is not 0555, which would mean that it's not Granite long distance and it's actually like maybe long distance with AT&T. So let's say the PIC is 0288. If you go into the ponds and you see that the PIC is 0288, then we know that it's long distance with AT&T. And we can tell that we service a local, but AT&T is their long distance carrier. So if we go in a portfolio and we know that the PIC is 0288, then this is what we are supposed to see, because it's not supposed to be loaded if it is with a different long distance provider, right? So just remember that the line is only supposed to be loaded in portfolio if it's with Granite LD on the 0555 network. If it's not Granite LD and it's on a different network, then we are supposed to see this page because it's not supposed to be loaded here. Okay, so you may be asking yourself, well, what do we do if we go into portfolio and we see that it's not loaded in there, but we have a PON that says the PIC is 0555. So we know it's supposed to be, but we go into portfolio and we see it's actually not. What do we do, right? The answer is we will email the distro long distance and toll free. It's just an internal department here at Granite. It's called LD and toll free requests. And we're going to email them and we're going to say, hey, let me go back to my ticket here, right? We'll say, hey, per this PON, the PIC is this and that, but it's not in portfolio, please assist. They're going to look at the PON, they're going to see, oh yeah, look at that, the PIC is 0555, it should be loaded in portfolio, and then they'll go ahead and do it for us. So if you go into portfolio and you see it's not loaded, that's actually, that's kind of exciting because we found the issue. Oh, that's the issue. It wasn't loaded in portfolio. That's why long distance wasn't working. And then all we got to do to fix long distance is just email that distro, and boom, it's fixed. Likely, that's what we wish for, right? So if it's not loaded and it's supposed to be, email LD and toll free to get that fixed. Another thing to mention too is, let's say we go into portfolio and we see that it looks like this, but there's another possibility that it could be deactivated. I wish I had a slide to show that, and I don't have access to portfolio up here, so I do apologize for that. But literally, you would see this, and this box right here could say deactivated. If that box says deactivated, then all of these other boxes, you see how they're a very white color, they will all be grayed out, and it'll look like a dead account. You could just tell. It'll look deactivated. And it says deactivated, and it'll look deactivated. If you see that, you may be asking yourself, oh, well, what do we do now, right? Because it's loaded, but it's deactivated. It's the same step. All we're going to do is, make sure we have that pawn that is saying that it's supposed to be 0555, and then we're just going to email the LD and toll-free request distro. And we'll say, hey, I'm sorry, let me go back a little bit. If you see that it is deactivated, we're going to confirm that the pawn is, that is showing that is 0555. We're not going to email LD and toll free. What we're going to do is we're going to hit this drop down and we're going to hit activate. So when we're hitting, when we're in this page, we're in the edit mode of this, we can change things in here. And if we have a pawn that says that the pick is 0555, but we see it's deactivated, we have permission to make it activated per that pawn. So we can go ahead and do that. So if you see it's deactivated and it's not supposed to be, just activate it yourself. It's totally okay. Activate it, and then we'll go to the customer and say, hey, we know it's a programming issue. Can you please test your service again? Another thing to note, though, is any changes that we make to this page, any changes that we make to portfolio, it will take about 15 to 30 minutes for it to actually take effect on the customer's end. So, for example, if this is deactivated and we hit activate, the lines won't be automatically fixed right away. It takes about 15 to 30 minutes because it takes that amount of time for our friends over at Long Distance MCI to activate it correctly, right? So just give them some time. If you change anything in here, any update you send to the customer, just let them know, hey, it's going to take about 15 to 30 minutes. It usually takes about 15 minutes. I always tell the customer 30 minutes just because, there's some customers who will be waiting by the phone, and, that 15th minute they'll be calling and testing it, and then they'll report, hey, it's not working. Maybe it would take them 18 minutes, and then it would work. So I always just give them that extra 15 minutes. I always tell them 30 minutes. Wait about 30 minutes to really test it. If it's not working after 30 minutes, then there will be an issue. But that's why I usually tell them that. Last thing to note for now in portfolio is domestic only. So I know when I first brought this up, I was showing you guys, I kind of glossed over, but the international section, if you hit this drop down, there's actually two selections as well. There's international and domestic. The difference between those, I'm sure you could guess, but the difference between those is if the international section is clicked, then the line will be able to call international numbers, right? But if the domestic selection is clicked, then the line can only call lines that are within the United States territories, right? So domestic. So you may get a ticket saying, please verify that the international call block is off, or please remove the international block, something like that. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna go into portfolio, and all we're gonna do is we're gonna look and see what this is posted as. So if we get a ticket saying, hey, there's an international block on the line, can you please remove it? You're going to go into portfolio, and if there is an international block on the line, all that means is that this is selected as domestic. So if it's selected as domestic, then we are blocking international calls. All we have to do is the same thing as activating. All we have to do is click the one that we want, domestic or international, hit submit. wait about 15-30 minutes, and then it should be all set. So yes, so this is what it'll look like if it's set as domestic only. Once we hit submit, it'll show as domestic only right there. Okay, so once we know that, so that was a quick overview of portfolio. I'm hoping that was good and clear. But essentially what we did, right, for our ticket is we just checked it in portfolio. So we're going to go and we're going to note that, right? So our first step was the pawn, which we did. And then we said confirmed line is loaded in portfolio. So if we were working an account that was local only, we work it very slightly different. And I'm going to briefly go over that before we move on to verifying with local, right? So let's say we get this ticket and same note saying, hey, we can't call long distance numbers. What we're going to do is we're going to go to services page, right? Let's say we go to services page, and let's just say, for an example, as soon as this loads, but let's just say for example that the line isn't listed in OnePlus. Let's say the OnePlus is completely gone. So there's some services page, there's some accounts that when you go into the services page, it literally looks like this. It says local. That's the top of the page. There's nothing above it. It literally just says local. If you go into an account and you see that, that is telling you that we only service local for that account. And that means that they have long distance services with a different carrier. It could be AT&T, it could be Quest, it could be anybody. It could also be Verizon, just not through us. So if you see that and you see it's local only, we still need to work this as a long distance issue and a long distance ticket. Just because we don't service the long distance side doesn't mean that we're completely exempt from working a ticket. We can still do one half of it, which is verifying the local side. So that being said, if you go into an account and it's a local only account, follow the steps that I've mentioned thus far, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure, of course, it's loaded, or it's going to, we're going to make sure, of course, that it is being serviced and make sure it's not end dated. And then we're going to go to the pawns and we're going to pull what the pick is. So if we go in the service page and we know it's local only, the pick should not be 0555. It should be something else. It can be anything else. It could be 02288. It could be 0432. It could be anything. Just note what it is. And then when we go to our service page, we'll say, hey, per pawn, the pick is, let's say 0288 and 9500. Whatever it's posted as in that pawn, we will, note that. And then we also want to just make sure, we also want to check portfolio again. But for accounts that have local only, what we're going to do is we're going to do the opposite. We're going to make sure it is not loaded in portfolio, because it shouldn't be. It should only be loaded in portfolio when it is on the 0555 network and it is on Granite long distance. So those are the same steps. We're checking pawns and we're checking portfolio. So just remember that for now. When we're verifying services with Granite, the main things that we're doing is we're just making sure that it's loaded in the service page. Like all of the other tickets, we want to make sure we service it. We want to go into the pawns and we want to note what the picks are. Then we want to make sure it's loaded or not loaded in portfolio as it should be, right? So once we do that, so once we do that, we can move on to the next step, which is, let me go back to my slide here. Verifying local, right? So verifying Granite, we just covered that. That's all. What I just covered thus far is all under the umbrella of verifying Granite. Once we, checked the services page, pawns, and portfolio, all that, the next step is going to be local. Now, just going back real quick, it can sound like a lot, verifying Granite, but once you get more experience on these and you're working long distance tickets, that whole step will take you maybe 2 minutes. It's very quick. It's just knowing where to go and how to do it can take some time to understand. But once you have some experience with these tickets, that first step will take maybe 2 or 3 minutes depending on what you find, right? And then the next step, of course, is going to just be to verify local. So we're going to do that next, right? So let's do that. Let's go to our slide. Verifying with the local carrier. Okay, so there's 3 key items the local carrier needs to review in order to confirm services on their end. So what we've done thus far is we've confirmed services on our end. And then what we're going to do is confirm services on the local carrier side. We're going to verify PIC and LPICs, PIC, LPICs, and blocks. And then we're going to have them review a call sample. So the local carrier just needs to confirm the PIC and LPIC info they have in their switch. Excuse me, let me read it again. The local carrier just needs to confirm the PIC and LPIC info they have in the switch matches what we have in the most recent PON. To do this, we will DPI a ticket, or depending on the carrier, we can just call to verify. So basically what we're doing with the PIC and LPICs is we looked at the PONs. We know what it's supposed to be on our end, right? So let's go back to our ticket. For our ticket, we know per this PON, the PIC is 0555. Okay. So what we want to do with that information is we want to verify it with the local carrier. We're going to go to the local carrier and we're going to say, hey, the PIC is 0555 and the LPIC is 5124. Can you confirm? They will confirm, or they'll make an update, or or whatnot, right? So how do we actually do that? For any carrier that we can e-bond, we can just e-bond it. We'll say, cannot call long distance. This shouldn't be DPO. If we're DPIing a ticket, or if we're sending a ticket for long distance, never ever DPO it. Always DPI it, because a long distance issue is always going to be a programming issue, and we will never need to send out a tech. The only reason why we will ever need to send out a tech on a long distance ticket is to get call samples. Possibly. Most of the time, 90% of the time, we can just have the customer get the call samples, but there are a few instances where the line is either like a gate line or an alarm line, something like that the customer just doesn't have access to and will need assistance. That is the only reason we would ever send out a tech on a long distance ticket. So that being said, if we're working a long distance ticket, always DPI it. Always. So when we're e-bonding it, what we're gonna do, if we say we're gonna e-bond this, right? How we're gonna do it is, I always do it like this. I say, please verify PIC/LPIC is whatever it is, right? There we go. 0555/5124 with no blocks. So we're asking them to make sure there's no blocks in the switch. With no blocks in the switch. And that's how we would write it out. That's how we would write out the request to check the PICs and blocks, right? We're going to copy that. We're going to throw that in the ATI, and then we can submit it. That's just one portion of it, though. While we're DPIing this ticket, we can also include the next step, which is call samples. I'll go over that in a second. But if we get call samples, we also include that in the DPI, and then we'll send it. So when we're DPIing a ticket with long distance, there's 2 things we want to check. Primarily, when we are sending a ticket to a local carrier, we're checking PICs and blocks. That's kind of like one thing. And then we're also sending them a call sample so they can review it in depth. So let's go back to my slide here. So PICs, blocks, right? The local carrier also needs to confirm that there are no blocks on lines in the switch. So that's the first thing that we did: verify PICs, verify blocks. The third thing here, call samples. The local carrier needs to review a recent call sample to ensure it is being handed off to the long distance carrier correctly. So I know I mentioned earlier in this training video, how the long distance routing works, right? How does it work? The local carrier will route it to the long distance carrier. So when we're sending them a call sample, what we're doing is we're asking them to make sure that they are passing off the call correctly. That's why we give them a call sample. Okay, so that being said, what we've done so far, right? We've confirmed, we verified. We're going to have the local carrier verify, pick and LPIC, and no blocks and switch. So we've written that out. We will copy and paste that into our ATI once we're finished, right? But we got to finish the next section, which is the call sample. So we're going to move on to the next step, which is, verifying local carrier. We've done these two. We're going to do call samples. So getting a call sample. So you want to call the trouble line first to try to get an employee on site. So we have them make the test calls, right? So if they're having an issue with long distance, and it's a true long distance, issue, they should be able to receive calls and they should be able to call local numbers. So that being known, we can call the number that they are, reporting having issues on. They're saying, hey, I can't call long distance on this line, but we can call that line. And it is recommended to call the troubled line first to get call samples, because most of the time, the person who is reporting the issue is on the other end of that line. It's either that person's phone or it's the employee on site. Most of the time when tickets come to us and they're submitted to us, most of the time the people who are submitting the tickets are like corporate or the main contact or whatnot, right? But if we're calling the actual line, we actually might get the person who knows of what's going on. And this is what I always do too. When I try to get call samples, let me go back to it. I always call the number first. So for example, let's say this one, right? I would call this number. Hopefully someone answers. If no one answers, then I will move on to the local contact. Try call the local contact to get call samples. If she doesn't answer, then I will call the main contact. In this case, it's the same number, but in other cases, they're differing numbers. So I will call main contact as well. And if I'm still not getting any, information from them or no one's picking up, I'll leave a voicemail requesting the call samples, and then after you've exhausted all those options, once you test, called the actual number that's having issues and the local contact and the main contact, then we can email the main contact and say, hey, we need call samples, and I'll tell you how to format that in a second here. But that's basically how we want to do that, right? But anyways, let's say we actually do get an employee on the line, right? Whether it's we called the actual line or we called local contact or main contact. Let's just say we got a customer on the line. This is kind of how I always say. I say, hey, this is Chris, or hello, this is Chris from Granite Telecommunications. I'm just calling in regards to your line you guys were having issues with, calling long distance numbers. Is there anybody available who knows of that issue, or maybe a manager that I can speak with? I say my spiel like that because basically I'm asking for someone who knows of that issue or a manager. A lot of times, sometimes when you answer or whoever you call, whoever answers, there's times where they don't know what's going on. So I immediately just assume that they don't know, just in case. That way I'm not confusing anybody, and I just tell them the reason you're calling and ask them for somebody who knows what you're talking about to assist. Sometimes they'll say, oh yeah, 1 second, let me transfer you, or 1 second, I'm gonna go get that guy or that girl to assist you. And once we finally get someone who knows about the long distance issue and they're willing to assist us, now we're in business. Now we can do our call samples. So, and yeah, that's basically what I was talking about. Here, let me just go over here, right? It says, if the line is a fax line, have them call the repair fax number. So if the number that they're having issues with calling long distance numbers is a fax number, then just instead of having them call a long distance number, or your long distance number, have them call our fax number, which is this number. So going back, like when we are getting a call sample from a customer, we're going to have them call our number directly, right, to test it. But if it's a fax number, we're going to have them just call the fax number here. And then I was saying, call LCON, then MCON. If unable to get call samples after attempting the first three options, then email the MCON of the ticket. We already went over that. Oh, okay. So, but yeah, once we actually have someone on the line who's willing to get some call samples for us, we're going to do these three tests. So when I say call samples, there's three of them. We're going to have the customer do three tests, and I'm going to explain, what they are. So the first one is kind of straightforward, right? The regular long distance call sample. Basically, we're going to have the customer call from the line that they're having issues with, and they're going to call a phone number with the one, the area code, and the rest of the number. Just a normal long distance call. The second call I'm going to have them do is what we call a 1010 dial around call sample. And literally what this is it's a troubleshooting code that we can dial in front of a long distance number that potentially could route around the local carrier, and it's possible it could complete with that code. So it could be a temporary solution, and it also helps us further troubleshoot and understand where the issue could be. It helps us isolate the issue. I'll jump into that a little further once I get to that slide, but just know that is the second call. We're going to do dial rounds. And then the third one is called the ANAC call sample, and it's just a toll-free number. It's 800-444-4444. And all that number it's an identification number. So you can try it. Feel free to pause the video and try it if you would like. But you can call from your cell phone. You can call from any number. If you call this phone number, you'll get a recording, and it will say, "Hello, welcome to MCI. You are calling from 617-837-5661, or whatever number you're calling from." So basically all this is it helps us to determine what number that our customer is calling from. And of course, I have a slide on that as well, and I'll go further into that, explain exactly, how it's used for, what situations it can be used for, and it can be very helpful. So we'll get into the next slide. Next here, we'll talk about how to get a call sample, what we need for the regular long distance call sample here. Okay, hello. So now we're going to jump into how to actually make these call samples. We're going to start with the most simple one, just a regular long distance call sample. So have the customer call your line directly and then note the following information. This is the most critical information we need for call samples. We need the number they called from, the number they dialed, the exact time of that call, and then the result of that call. So pretty straightforward. Of course, if they're reporting a number, they can't call long distance on a specific number. We want to know what number that is. Most of the time, it's going to be in the ticket. The ticket's going to be opened with that already. That information already in there. Our example, going back here, here they already provided the number that can't call long distance, right? So they're having issue on this number ending in 0639, which is great. But when we're calling the customer to get the actual call samples, we still want to get that information. It's just good to double check, and when we're actually getting the call samples, we want to be accurate in that. Which is going back a little bit to the ANAC number. That can be helpful with call samples. The reason being, when we get call samples for long distance troubleshooting, it needs to be accurate. So when we open up a ticket with a long distance carrier, they can look into the right call. So that being said, looking at this ticket, they did provide us the number that they called, or the number that they called from, and they actually also provided a number that they called to, which is great information. Unfortunately, it's not going to be of much help to us because we didn't get the time and we didn't get the result. So it's very important that we get all of that information to make up one call sample. If we just have a couple of those pieces, if we just have just the call from, just the called to, and then we don't have the time or the result, or if any one of these parts is missing, it's an inaccurate call sample and we cannot use it. Absolutely need the number they called from, the number they called, the time, and we need the result as well. We need all this information so we can open up a ticket. A long distance carrier, basically what they're going to do is they're going to grab this call sample and they're going to look into the history of that specific call sample. So when they're looking into their programming and then their switch, they're gonna look up, the number they called from. They're gonna see which number. They're gonna look at the time. Let's say it's 12:52. All right. Well, with this number called this number at 12:52. That must be the number we're looking at. Once they get that call sample, then they can actually look into the specific routing information and exactly how it's being passed off, or if they are actually receiving it. So that's why it needs to be accurate, and that's why we need that information. Another thing too, when we're calling into the site or the customer, and we get someone on the line who can help us, we also want to make sure we want to confirm their dial pattern. So here at Granite, when I need to make a call out to a different number, I dial on my phone equipment. I have to dial 91 and then the phone number. So that's our dialing pattern, and each site may have a dial pattern, or they may not. Some sites, may just can call, if they're going to call a long distance number, they may just dial 1 and then the full phone number. Some sites may have to dial 91 and then the 1 and then the phone number. Or some sites have to call 181 and then the phone number. So we just want to know exactly what their dial pattern is. Do they have to dial 1? Do they have to dial a 91 or 181 or whatever else it may be? That can help us further troubleshoot as well. So if they're just not using a dial pattern that they may have, that is a reason why they can't call long distance, or they just can't call out, period. So just remember that as well. If we're working just a regular local carrier ticket, and a customer is saying, hey, I can't call out on my line, a good question to ask is, hey, well, what's your dial pattern? Do you need to dial a 9 or a 1 or a 91 or 181 or anything like that? If they say, I don't know, or yeah, we need to, and they're not, that's why it's failing. So that's another good piece of knowledge to know, even just troubleshooting regular tickets as well. Yep. So just remember when you're calling the customer to get a long distance call sample, just remember we need this information: called from, called to, the exact time of the call, and the result of the call. Once we have that, that's our first call sample, and we can document it. So I'm gonna go back to my ticket here, and let's just pretend that let's pretend that we just called Kathy. Let's say Kathy answered. And we said, hey, Kathy, we're calling from Granite Telecommunications, and we're just calling in regards to your long distance issue you're having on line ending in 0639. We just need a couple call samples from you. The first one being just a normal long distance call sample. What I'm going to have you do is call my line, 617-837-5661. Make sure you dial a 1 in front of it. Once you make that phone call, if you could just write down the exact time and the result of that call. And then I can hang up and I can give you a call back with that information. So that's kind of my little spiel to customers that I say. I always let them know that we're gonna have at least for the first portion, right? The first call sample that we're gonna have. We're gonna have them do all 3, but the first one I always detail it out, tell them what exactly we need. Tell them to write down the time, write down exactly what the result is, and most of the time, I usually, depending if I'm talking to them on the actual trouble line or not, I usually just hang up, have them test it, and I always tell them, I'll call you back in about 2 or 3 minutes, right? So that's the first one. And of course, when we're talking to the customer, we'll have them do all 3 tests, and then we can hang up, and then we'll give them about 5 minutes. We'll call back 5 minutes later to get all the information, right? So we just went over the first call sample, right, that we need, which is the regular long distance call sample. So let's pretend we talked to Kathy. We gave her that little spiel, and she is going to give us she's going to go and make that test. So once she actually makes that test, say we call back, this is the format I usually write it in, right? So I say, called Elcon Kathy and received the following call samples. So this is my note that I usually write when I get all 3, right? So I usually just pre-write it because I know I'm going to get all 3. So I say that. We'll say call sample 1. Called from. Let's copy that. I'm going to do called to, let's say I always use my my phone number, 617. Oh, what's going on here? 617, here we go. Why is it not? There we go, 617-837-5661. Let's say the time, let's just make up a time. We'll say, 11:10 a.m. Result received, ring busy. So with the results that you can receive, there's a couple different ones. They can, if a call is failing on long distance, they can either receive like a busy tone, which would be ring busy, RB for short. Also, it could be, an error or recording on the line. If the customer is reporting, oh yeah, we got an error on the line and we got a recording, just ask them what the recording was, because there could be different kinds. There could be, calls cannot be completed as dialed. It could say, codes unauthorized, LD, it could say anything. The most common one, though, is calls cannot be completed as dialed. So just make sure you get that error message. It is important to get, if we're having a hard time, getting verbatim. At the very, very least, we can at least write, receives error message. That is also good enough as well. But so yeah, that's for the first call sample. And of course, we get that after we call them back, right? So before we actually hang up on them, we're going to say, yep, please give us this call sample. We need the number you called from, the number you called, the time, and the result. After you make that call, if you can also make a second call, and that is going to be with our dial rounds. So let's pause that scenario real quick. Let's talk about dial rounds. So I know I previously went over it very quickly. I basically explained kind of what it is. Let me read my little note here. It's a dial around is a code that dials around the local carrier and makes a long distance call directly on a long distance network, so 0555, and is dialed before the long distance number trying to be called. So how it works is, if we're going to make a phone call, right, we're going to hit 1, and then let's say my number is 617-837-5661. With the dial around, what we're going to have them do is, on the phone equipment, instead of dialing the 1 first, you're going to dial 1010, and then 555, and then the 1, and then the area code 617, and then the rest of the number 837-5661. So that's how it practically looks and works. And when we have the customer, that's how I explain it to them as well. I always say, hey, I'm going to have you make another test call to the same line as previous, so my line, but this time you're going to enter a code in front of the number, and that code is 1010555. That's usually how I explain that. So kind of going further into what a dial round actually is, a dial round, as I said before, is a code, and this code, basically, when we enter it on the line, we are entering the network that we want the line to route on. So if you actually look at the code, it looks pretty similar. I divide it with a hyphen, right? But to kind of just visualize it a little better, right? If we kind of divide it like this, here, let me make my note. That way you can see it better. So I had it like this, right? 1010. 555, right? That's our code. That's just how I wrote it out originally. But if I rewrite it like this is actually kind of what it looks like. So we're dialing 101, and then we're entering the PIC. So 0555, right? That we've seen that before. 0555 is Granite's PIC, or MCI long distance, who we use. It's their PIC. So basically, what we're doing is we're dialing 101. That starts out the line, so we can make a call, right? 101, and then we're gonna enter what PIC we want the call to dial on, which is 0555. Once we have that, then we're gonna dial the 1 for long distance, and then we're gonna dial the area code. 617, and then the rest of the number 837-5661. So when we actually make a call like this, what is actually happening is we're making the call directly on the long distance network, which means we are cutting out the middleman. We are cutting out the local carrier. So as previously mentioned, how a long distance call works, right, is we have the local carrier will start the call, right? They'll pick it up and we'll route it through their trunks to the handoff point. And then they'll give it to the long distance carrier, who will then pick it up and will complete it. However, when we use a dial around, that is not the case. When we use a dial around, the long distance carrier will complete the call, will do the whole call by itself. For example, I use that relay race as an example, right? With the dial around, we're basically cutting out the first runner, and the second runner, being the long distance carrier, is going to run the whole race. This is a good, very useful tool, and it helps us isolate the issue. How does that help us isolate the issue, you may ask? It helps us isolate it because if a call, so for example, if a customer is unable to call any long distance numbers, but then they are able to call a long distance number when they use the dial around, only when they use the dial around, that is telling me that they can call long distance when they are not using the local carrier to help route the call. They can call long distance when they are only using the long distance carrier to route the call. So if that's the case, then that tells me that there's an issue with the local carrier's routing. Because we can make the call without them, the issue is going to be with them, because once they're back into the picture, it's failing. I wonder why it's failing. It's because the local carrier is back in the picture, and there's something on their end that is, it could be a block, it could be the pics are loaded incorrectly, it could be something on their end that is blocking the calls from ever even reaching the long distance carrier. Because we have proven with the dial around, we can get on that network and the network can, terminate it. So if the dial around works, then we can assume the issue is most likely on the local carrier's end. However, if the dial around fails, then the issue may still be on the local or the long distance carrier's end. So the dial around only gives us more or extra information when it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and there's not really any other information that we can assume from, right? But if the dial around is working, we can assume the issue is going to be on the local's end, and that's where we'll push. We'll push more on the local carrier's end. So when you call the customer and you have them do call samples, and let's say they have a successful dial around call, when we open up a ticket with a local carrier, we're actually going to give them that dial around call sample as well. We're going to give them both. We're going to give them the long distance call sample, the regular one that we got previously, that failed. And then we'll give them the dial around one, the 1010-555, and say, hey, this one worked. Can you please compare and contrast these calls and tell me why that one's working and why one isn't? Basically what we're doing is we're sending both call samples to the switch, and we have evidence that one works with dial arounds and one doesn't. And so the translations reps over the switch are going to look at those calls, and they're going to look into it and see why the one without the dial around is failing. What they'll see is that they just have the routing set up incorrectly. It could be, as I said earlier, it could be routing issue. It could be a pic is loaded incorrectly. There could be a block on the line. It could be anything like that. So when we actually send those call samples, both of them, the local carrier is able to investigate it and see just a little more, on what's going on and potentially fix the issue. So that's why dial arounds are very important to get, because if we do get a successful one, it dramatically increases the time that we can solve the issue. So I recommend every single time you're working a long distance ticket and every time you are calling the customer to get a long distance sample, do dial arounds as well every single time, and then submit them. But yeah, that is the dial around. That will be our second call. So going back to our little scenario here, right? Let's get rid of this, or what? Let's grab it. All right, so call sample one, right? Here, let's just so we can see it. better. Then we'll say call sample. Let's do it like this. Say call sample 2. So we're going to say called from their number, right? So it's going to be the same format. Called from, called to. Now with the dial around, when you have called to, you just put the 1010-555 in there and the full number. That's great. And we'll have time. Say 11:20. And then the result. So let's say, whatever the result was, if it was successful, you'd say success. If it was failed, you'd hit failed. So success. Let's just say successful. And that's how I would document that. And then before we, get that, before we would get that information when we called back, we would ask the customer to do one last final call sample. And that is the ANAC. And I know I mentioned this earlier. So the ANAC, here it is, ANAC. It's our last call sample that we're going to have them do, and it's the most simple. It's simpler than the other ones as well, because all we're going to have them do is call the 800 number, this 800-444-4444 number, just so we can confirm that the number that they're calling from or the number that they're reporting having the long distance issues is the one they're actually calling from. So as I mentioned before, the ANAC number is used to identify the number that is being called from. And it can be useful when the customer does not know what line is having the LD issue, and it also determines what number a certain line is. So, for example, let's go back to our ticket. But for example, so we could have a ticket that is opened, and it could say one of our line. This is the most simple example. One of our lines is having issues calling long distance numbers. That doesn't give us a lot of information, because they could have 20 lines in the account. We don't know which line they're working on. If you see that, the best thing to do is to call the local contact, call the main contact, or simply just call one of the lines that you see in the services page in the account. Just try to reach out to the site, and because when we don't have that information, one of the lines isn't working, what do we got to do, right? We have to verify what line they're having issues on. Instead of just emailing them and saying, hey, we need more information, call the site, and while we call the site, we can have them do call samples, and we can identify the line they're having issues with at the same time. So we can be very efficient in that way. So if a ticket is open saying, one of our lines can't call long distance, or even better, if they say, line 2 is having issues calling long distance numbers. That happens all the time. I see that quite often, and unfortunately, we're unable to identify what line 2 would be. If we go into the services page, you can see that there isn't any, anywhere that says line 1, line 2, line 3, right? Of course, it does say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., but that isn't accurate to what the customer has. It can be sometimes, but sometimes it isn't. So we can't go off of that every time, because it is different depending on the account, and there's no way to tell. So if they're saying, hey, we can't call long distance on line 3, you may want to assume that this is line 3, but we can't assume. So if they're saying, yeah, line 3 is not having issues, what we need to do is reach out to them and say, hey, what number are you having issues with calling long distance numbers? And they'll say, oh, it's line 3. And a lot of customers may not actually know what the actual number is per the line. So I could say, well, what's the number on line 3? And they could say, I don't know. The best thing to do is to have them call the ANAC number. If they call the 800 number, 444-4444, then they will receive a recording, and they will tell them exactly what number they're calling from. So, so if they say line 3 is having issues, they'll call out on the ANAC number, and it'll identify the number. That helps us to be very accurate when giving call samples to MCI and whatnot. So that one's pretty simple. And I always have them do it every single time, even if it's just one number on the account. Just get into the habit of doing it. You may be surprised that you may find something interesting when you may not think to do it, but if you just do it every single time, you may find something, you may find an issue. You may find that the number that they're reporting is not the number that's having issues. Even if there's only one line in the account, you may think, oh, well, there's only one line on the account, then I don't need to ANAC it. I've had tickets where there was only one line in the account and they're reporting issues on a number. They're saying, oh, my number ending in 5661 can't call long distance numbers. I have them ANAC it, and it comes to find out that they're not even calling from that number. They're calling from a completely different number that could be in a different account, or better yet, we don't even service. So that's why ANAC it every single time, no matter what, even if it's only one line in the account, because you could find that they're actually reporting a line that we don't even service. And then if that is the case and we didn't catch that, we would have been running around for a long time trying to find the issue, because no one identified the number they're actually calling from or confirmed it. The customer can just be telling us that, oh yeah, it is this number, but it really isn't. And the long distance carrier isn't seeing an issue. The local carrier isn't seeing an issue because the customer is giving us wrong information. So we never really want to take the customer for their word. I know that sounds bad, but we want to confirm everything. We want to know, we want to have our control on everything. We want to make sure that we're verifying it, because we don't want to take the word of the customer, because they may just, they may not know. And basically they're calling us for assistance. We're the experts, so we need to be able to take responsibility and be accurate in our troubleshooting. So this is a very helpful step, a very simple but very helpful and very important step in getting long distance call samples accurate. So once we have all that information, right, what's the next step? The next step is to verify with the long distance carrier. And this is, one of our main objectives, right? Going all the way back to the beginning of this course, right? We had, just looking for it 1 second here. Going way back, right? 3 main goals to keep in mind when starting a new LD ticket. We want to verify Granite. We want to verify local. And then the last thing is verify LD. So going back to our ticket, right, we already, in the past slides, we've already verified the pond, we verified services page, we looked into portfolio, that's verifying Granite. And then what did we do? We got some call samples. We submitted them over to local carrier using the DPI e-bonding system, or we called it in, right? And that's verifying local. And the last thing is, once we actually do have these call samples, is just to verify it on the long distance end. And the only thing we got to do is open up a ticket with them. We actually have a different program that we use with the long distance, with our long distance carrier, and it's kind of like e-bonding, but it's a little different. I know I kind of compared e-bonding and portfolio. It's kind of very similar, and that is true. But portfolio and this other portal, it's MCI portal. It's where we open up a ticket. So yeah, we're gonna get into that next, and I will outline exactly how to get to MCI portal and how to open up a long distance ticket. So yeah. Okay, so opening up a ticket with MCI. Please note, we cannot open a long distance ticket without a recent call sample. That's why I was stressing earlier. Why it's very important to get this call sample, and I'll show you why exactly we can't open up the ticket without it in this next step. So how I usually get to that portal is there's just a link. I sent all these links to myself here. I have them all saved on my computer. Reach out to someone, supervisor or anybody on Slack, or if you don't have this link, it's very easy to get this link. Just reach out to someone for the link to MCI, and then once you get the link, just save it on your favorites, like on your Google. That's what I usually do. So I usually just have it saved on my favorites, and I can just click it, and then as soon as I click it, it's going to take me to this screen here. As soon as you click it, it'll take you to this screen. So this is the screen for opening a ticket with our long distance carrier. We will only ever open up a long distance ticket with a long distance carrier using Verizon. Verizon is our long distance provider, and we use their portal to open up tickets. So Very first thing they're going to ask you for is service ID. That is just the phone number. If they ask you for the service ID, it's just the phone number. There's no other like ID that you need or account number or anything like that. Throughout the course of opening this ticket, it's going to ask you for a service ID, and it's also going to ask you for an account number. It is just asking for the phone number that you're having trouble with. So just remember that. I know a lot of people may open up their first MCI ticket and get stuck on this very first step, not knowing what the service ID or what an account number is. While you're opening up an MCI ticket, just remember, if they're going to ask you for a service ID or an account number, it's just the phone number. So that's great. So let's go to our ticket. Let's grab the number that we're having issues on. We're going to throw it into here. We're going to note the state, which is Florida. Florida. There you are. Okay. So this is a little silly step as well, but it's important. The security check. You need to enter this correctly twice. So let's see if it happens when I do it now. We need to enter it. All right. We'll hit next. So if you enter it correctly, this is the thing that you're going to see next. It says the service identifier number is not found in Verizon records. If you get this error message, that is okay. You will get this error message every single time you open up an MCI ticket. If you get this error message, do not copy and paste this into the ticket saying we can't open up an MCI ticket. All you have to do, if you get this, and you will get this, is enter it a second time. For whatever reason, you have to enter it twice. Correctly twice. If you enter it wrong on accident, it'll say, captcha does not match. Try it again. Once you do it successfully twice, then we'll get to this page. So then we're going to ask, select a type of service. You can either hit one of these two. I always hit the first one. You can hit switch long distance as well. I always hit the first one just out of habit. It works and it's good. It's fine. But just remember, one of these two. It's fine. If we had a previous MCI ticket number, we could enter in there. An MCI ticket number starts with the date, starting with a year. So, for example, if an MCI ticket was open today, it would look like this. 2022, today's year, the month, which is March, the day, which is the 29th, and then it'll be a series of like 5 or 6 numbers. So if you have a ticket that looks like this, then you can enter in there. Don't enter the 159 and don't enter any elect tickets. If you don't have an MCI ticket, it's totally fine. There's no red star. We do not need to enter it if we don't have it. So we'll hit continue. Now it's going to ask us for the company name, and it's going to ask us for an account number, which is just our phone number. So with the company name, I always go up and grab the customer's name, which is, for this case, it's going to be the Hyatt. Because we are MCI's customer, this account could also be listed under the account name Granite. So just note that I always do the customer's name hyphen or slash Granite Telecom, or anything like that. Then we're going to, again, grab this number. Hit continue. And this is our last page here. So this is where all the information is, and this is where everything we will fill out, right? So we're going to write your name, so my name. Remember, whatever you put in this box, the first name box, the first 3 letters of this word will be the PIN to gain access to this ticket. So every time I open up an MCI ticket, the PIN is going to be CHR, because that's the first 3 letters of my name. Whatever you put in this box, the first 3 letters will be the PIN. But last name, you can put your last name, you can put Granite. And then we'll put contact number. Contact number for Granite repair is 866-450. Oh, too many numbers over here. 450-7625. The email address you want to enter is the LD distro. If you don't remember, I'm going to tell you what it is, but if you don't remember, if you didn't write it down, you can find that out by going to your emails. and just hovering over a long distance, or just you can just go to the new email and you could search it using this too. Find it by entering into this box if you need it. But just remember, it's just LD dash repair at granitenet.com. It's quite simple. So it's just LD repair at granitenet.com. But remember to spell it correctly. Okay, cool. You also want to make sure there's no spaces. You see, if I have a space, it highlights red. That means bad. Make sure that there's no extra spaces. You can't even enter a space here. So this one, if you have an extra space, it'll be red. You don't want that. You get that out of there, and it'll work. So site access information. This is going to be the local contact. Of course, for whatever reason, if there is no local contact, you could just use Granite and the 866 number. But we do have a local contact in this case, so we're going to use her. Her name's Kathy. Oh. Use her phone number. Okay, so it's now going to ask you when can we access the equipment. I always put business hours, and I always just leave it as Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The reason for this is Verizon MCI will never send out a tech to this site. They need to ask this for, on their end, just for records, but they will never send a tech out on an MCI ticket. If they do, that's an issue, and that shouldn't have occurred. So I've never run into that. You will probably never run into this as well. They will never send out a tech on this ticket. So there's really no need to specify the business hours. I would just leave them as default. So business hours, leave it, move on. Our customer ticket number, so they're asking for customer ticket number. That's going to be our ticket number because we're the customer. So we want this. This is important because when we do finally open up a ticket, they'll send us a email that we can gain access to this ticket. And then with that email, they'll have our customer ticket on it. And it's just easier for us to find it. So finally, we'll come down here. It says, what type of issue are you experiencing? If you notice, there is no option, at least yet, for long distance. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit can't make calls, because that is the nature of the issue, right? On a long distance call, what can't they do? They can't make calls. They can't make long distance calls. They can make normal calls. They just can't make long distance calls. And we're actually going to be able to specify it here, as it says, is the issue on all calls? No, not on all calls, because they can call local numbers. So not all calls. How many users can't make calls? I will always hit entire site every single time, because by hitting entire site, the potential for them to actually check every single line is higher, and that is just better for us. We could hit single user, and they would only check one line, but if they're going to check the entire site, because sometimes with the call samples, we may not know exactly, what numbers having the issues, or we may not know how many numbers they're having issues. A customer could say, oh, we're having issues calling long distance numbers on this one line. They very well could have issues on the other lines as well. So I always hit entire site. It doesn't hurt. Now, this is where we enter our call samples, and this is why it is absolutely necessary we have a call sample to open up an MCI ticket. As you see there, every single box is red starred, and we cannot move on unless we enter something in this box. So we're gonna get our called from, or our call samples. So let's grab them. Called from. Make sure there's no space. Cool. Let's just say today's date, right? We want to say whatever time it was at. I think I put 11:10, right? Yep. So we're going to do 11:10 a.m. Now, when you hit this box, a ton of these boxes will pop up, and this is just all different kinds of time zones. All of these time zones will pop up. I usually, just to make it simpler for me, I'm in the Eastern Standard Time Zone, so I always just convert whatever the call sample is to that. That is just easier than trying to find all the other time zones. I just know exactly where this one is. I always used Eastern Daylight Time, America, New York. So if I get a call sample and the customer is in California and he told me, oh yeah, I made it at 12:10, I'm just gonna convert it. And it's gonna be 3:10, just to make it easier for me. Do it on, you do it your way. Just make sure it's accurate, and it should be fine. And then the last box here, I always enter this note. I say cannot call LD numbers. Receives. Let me fix that. Receives, I would say, busy tone. Or you could say receives error message. And then I can define it, whatever the error message is if we receive that. Calls cannot be completed as dialed. Be completed as dialed. Or whatever else you may have received. Just note it in there. And then we hit submit. If you want to, and if you have an additional call sample, we can do that for sure. We can add another one. If you have 2 call samples, sometimes customers will give us a bunch. If you have 2, it's always recommended just to enter it again. Enter a second one if you have it. As mentioned before, when we're calling the customer, I usually only have them do the 1 call sample. Of course, we'll do the dial rounds and we'll do the ANAC, but the dial round and the ANAC, we won't submit to the MCI. We won't submit to MCI. The ANAC, of course, is just for us, it's for our knowledge to confirm that the line that they're calling on is accurate. The dial round is to see if they can call long distance numbers without using local. So we're not going to send that to MCI. We are only going to send the first call sample to MCI. So if you just happen to have 2 regular long distance call samples, maybe they made a call from this line to another additional number at a different time, then we can go ahead and enter a second one. If you have a second one, definitely enter it. It's always better to have more than one. It just reduces the amount of errors, or if we have 2 call samples, maybe one of them is a bogus call sample, or just it wasn't accurate enough, but the second one was. So it's always better just to do more if you can. So if you wanted to enter another call sample, that's where you'd go to do it. Okay, so once we hit submit, I'm not going to hit submit because I don't need this ticket, but once we do hit submit, then this screen will load and it will give us a ticket that looks like this. It will, I already showed you earlier, but it's going to be the year 2022, 03, 29, and like 5 or 6 different numbers. It's also going to give us a PIN. And because I opened it, my PIN is going to be CHR. So once you get that information, and it's just a simple page. It uploads, and that's the only information you get. Once you get that information, just copy and paste it, copy the ticket number, copy the PIN, and then you can exit out of that. You can exit out. Cool. So we have what we want, and then when we submit the ticket, we'll say opened MCI ticket, PIN is CHR, pending response. Let's get that out of the way. Okay, so once we open the MCI ticket, we are basically done with starting a long distance ticket. To briefly summarize our 5 basic steps, this is take notes on these 5 steps. This is what you can do on every single long distance ticket. At least starting out, you may run into hiccups. For example, say we're on step 2, we're checking portfolio, and we find that the line isn't loaded. Then that's where we're going to stop. Our troubleshooting. We're going to stop at step 2 because we found the issue. Et cetera, et cetera. If we are at step 1 and we see that the services page, the services like OnePlus and the pawns are not matching, we can stop there because we found the issue. So that's what I mean by we want to. This is like the basic 5 steps that we want to do. Do this until you hit a roadblock. Once you hit that roadblock, you will find that you would find the issue, and we could make the proper adjustments. And I know I outlined all those issues that could be possible, right? So just to summarize with 5 basic steps, we have step 1, we want to check services to verify 1+, check pawns to verify PICs. Step 2, check portfolio to confirm the line is loaded and activated. Step 3, get call samples, dial rounds, and a naked as well. Once we have the call samples, if we are able to, we want to DPI a ticket or call it in. Basically, what we're going to have them do is verify PICs, blocks, and verify the call sample. Once we have that, we're just going to open up an MTI ticket. Once we have the MTI ticket open, we're going to get the MTI ticket number and the PIN, throw it in the ticket. And then that should conclude the first step, or that should conclude, opening up a long distance ticket, getting it to the proper places, and whatnot. Next, we're going to talk about what to do when we get updates on the long distance ticket. So on a long distance ticket, right, on ours that we did, or like theoretically did, we sent a ticket to the local carrier, we sent a ticket to the long distance carrier, and we left it, right? So now it's in their hands and they're reviewing it. Because we verified services on our end, we didn't have to do anything, so we moved on to the local carrier, gave them a ticket, also gave a ticket to the long distance carrier. So now the next thing I'm going to talk about is what to do next. What to do when the local carrier comes back and they give us updates. What to do when the long distance carrier comes back and gives us updates. Different scenarios that we can see. What happens when local carrier says, hey, the issue's not on our end, check with long distance. And then at the same time, what do we do when long distance says, hey, the issue isn't on our end, actually check with the local carrier. So now we have 2 carriers basically saying it's not on our end, it's on the local carrier, or it's on the long distance carrier. What do we do in that scenario? So that's something I'm going to go over as well in our next couple slides here. But this is a good page here just to summarize the 5 basic first steps of opening a long distance ticket. And I do strongly recommend, take a picture or note these down, post them up, when you're working a long distance ticket. This is everything you really need to know when troubleshooting a long distance ticket. And then going further, we're going to talk about what to do to follow up on a long distance ticket. Okay, so now we're going to get into the second portion of our quiz or assessment here. Just going to be talking about the troubleshooting portion. Let's get right into it. So question number 8, picking up from the last video we did. Question number 8, what are the 3 main goals we should keep in mind when troubleshooting long distance? 3 main goals we want to keep in mind is we want to remember to verify Granite services. And then we want to verify local services, and then also long distance. So those are the 3 main key areas that we could find an issue, right? So it could be in Granite services, it could be anywhere, on our end, it could be in the local switch, it could be somewhere in the billing or somewhere on the local's end. So we're going to want to verify that. And then the last one is long distance. So just remember, local carrier will handle the call initially, hand it out to long distance will end it. So because of that, we want to check both of them because as they're handling the calls. And then we do want to check our services as well, just to make sure our records are up to date. And that's quite simple. Next question here is name the 3 key places to look to verify services on Granite's end. So there's 3 places we can look to, in our records to make sure that we are not at fault and make sure that we are actually routing and doing what we need to do to complete these calls successfully on our end. So that is services page, the pawns, and portfolio. So of course we just want to check the services page. Remember 1+, make sure it's listed in 1+ and in local. And then also once we verify that, we're going to check the pawns, check what the PICs are in those pawns, make sure they're matching our 1+ area and services page. And then lastly, we're going to check portfolio, make sure it's loaded or activated, and reactivate it or get it loaded as needed. If a line is deactivated in portfolio, but we have a pawn telling us that the PIC is 0555, what should we do? We can reactivate it in portfolio. So if we go into portfolio and it's not activated, but we have a pawn saying it's 0555, that gives us permission, we can reactivate it. The second portion of this question asks, what if the line is not loaded at all? And I misspelled all, so let me just fix that. It's not a huge deal, but what if the line is not loaded at all? We can also say email LD and toll-free distro to have the line or the lines loaded per the most recent PON. So there can just be two issues with portfolio. The line could just not be activated. It could be loaded, but if it's deactivated, all we gotta do is hit that button to reactivate it. If it's just not loaded at all, then we'll just email LD and toll-free distro, get that loaded. So we'll just email them, say, hey, per this PON, please load this line or these lines into portfolio. Once they email us back, we'll wait about 15-30 minutes before updating the customer. Next question here. When submitting a ticket or calling into the local carrier, what are the 3 items we should request them to check in the switch? So moving on to our second goal here, question 8, verifying Granite services is first and then verifying local. This kind of ties into that, right? So when submitting a ticket or calling into the local carrier to verify their end, what are the 3 items we would request to check the switch? So we want them to check the PICs. We want to make sure that their PICs are loaded correctly. We want to make sure there's no blocks. So we want them to check blocks. We just want them to review the call sample. We want to make sure that they're passing off the network to the long distance carrier properly. And the best way for them to troubleshoot that and investigate that is with the call sample. So short answer, PICs, blocks, and call samples. More on call samples. What is the basic information needed when gathering a call sample? We need the number called from, the number called, the time of that call, and the result of that call. That is the basic information that we need to open up an MCI ticket or a long distance carrier ticket. It's also the basic information needed for the local carrier to review the call sample on their end. A call sample without one of these pieces of information is an invalid call sample, and it just won't work. We need all of that information in order to allow the carriers to further assess and really look into it. Question number 13. Please explain what a dial round code is. Now, I don't know. This may be the hardest question here. I think just because it kind of asks a little bit of us, right? And we need to explain what this concept is. But I did write it this way because dial round codes are very important, and if you can grasp this, working the long distance ticket is really gonna just be a lot easier, because if we're able to use this tool, we can really find some issues very quickly on just using this tool. So what's a dial round code? A dial round code is a code that dials around the local carrier and makes a long distance call directly on the long distance network, so 0555. So what is this used for, right? We like to use this to further isolate an issue and to continue troubleshooting. It can also be used as a temporary solution for our customer. Our customer, if it's working, they can continue to dial 1010 555, then the rest of the number to make calls if it's working. Of course, if it is working, then that's going to be interesting in the next question. So true or false? If the dial round works, then we can assume that the issue is most likely on the local carrier's end. True or false? That is true. So just remember that. It's in the name, and dial round. If the dial round works, that means it is a long distance call is able to be successful only when it dials around the local carrier, which means if we cut out the local carrier in the job and it works, the local carrier is most likely at fault, because when we put them back into the equation, it's failing. So the person who's most likely dropping the ball is probably the one who is probably the local carrier, right? So just remember that is both question 13 and 14 can be very important. Important to make sure we get that down. So next question here, what is the ANAC number 800 444 4444 used for? All it is, it's a number used to identify the number that is being called from. So example, if I were to call this number from my cell phone, a recording will answer and will say, hello, welcome to MCI. Thank you for calling. You were calling from, and then it'll tell me what my number is. Very important, very useful tool to use to, just get some clarity on when the customer is reporting issues. They may not give us a specific number or line, and instead of, waiting for clarity by emailing, we can actually have them call this, and we can get that ourselves. So next question number 16. What are PAC codes? So PAC codes are 3 or 4 digit codes used to limit who can call LD numbers. Where can we find PAC codes? Portfolio. So PAC codes basically are All they are is they're 4-digit codes, and how it actually works is, if I'm going to call a long distance number, I'm going to call the number with the 1, so dial 1, the 10-digit number. I'm going to hear a double tone on it, and I'm just going to enter my PIN or my 3 or 4-digit code. Once I dial that, then it'll complete. And the main use for this is just to limit who can call long distance numbers, right? And the next question we already covered, but where can we find it? And it's in Portfolio. Just remember PAC codes or account codes, and Portfolio is referred to as account codes. Last question about Portfolio here, or at least in this section. How can we add an internal call block on a line? We can do that by setting it to domestic only in Portfolio. So this is useful when we're working like a fraud protection or a fraud alert. I did go over that briefly. If we're getting an email from Verizon saying, hey, we're suspecting some fraudulent calls, just remember what we want to do is we want to email them back, request them to block it on their end. Then we're going to open up a ticket on our end, like a 159 ticket. And just for tracking purposes, once that ticket's open, then whoever's assigned to that ticket will go into Portfolio and set that little box to domestic only. So the only thing to remember to how do we add an international block? Just set it to domestic. From international to domestic. Domestic only means it's blocking international calls. And that's it for our section about troubleshooting. As you can see here, you can see a little sneak peek. I do have a last section here about additional info, and it's just about some other things that we covered. And I'm going to get into that next. So 1 second here as I get that ready.